So the third and final test match between New Zealand and France taking place this weekend. Two sides stacked full of talent and both teams making drastic switches heading into this third test. We'll be looking through at the lineups in this preview alongside some statistics from the last match, and then at the end I'll give a prediction for I think will win this contest. So we will jump straight into the lineup. So another post-recording injury update of the All Blacks. It seems to be happening every week. At the moment, that left wing jersey is cursed, but Rieko Ioane, he is out of this matchup with a tight hamstring. It moves Severis to the left wing. It brings Will Jordan into the starting lineup on the right-hand side, and then off the bench at number 23, it is Jordie Barrett. So with that in mind, just know that anything that is said throughout this recording just a little bit later on was actually before this update, but once again, that late injury change for the All Blacks in this match. First of all, for the All Blacks, they have made a lot of changes across the 23-man side. Scott Robertson mentioning he wants to give every player an opportunity, and that is exactly what he has done here. In the front row, though, there's Ethan de Groot as the number one. Now, in that last game up against the French, we once again didn't see a huge amount of scrums, but something that I did notice, and I hope that it wasn't because of any sort of injury, but on the run out to the field at Sky Stadium, it did look like Ethan de Groot had a bit of a limp. So it did look like he was struggling a little bit, and I hope that they aren't pushing him too hard throughout these matches because they have been physical, and he's been actually pretty decent statistically throughout the first two tests. So de Groot, he has got another chance in that number one jersey, and on the other side of the scrum, we see the return of Tyrell Lomax, someone who did have a bit of an injury that he was dealing with, but he is back now. He was the pairing with de Groot throughout 2024, and in the middle of them, it is Samisoni Taukei'aho. He's made his way off the bench in both of the first two matches, and now gets the start in front of the home crowd in the locking duo, the same as what we saw last week. Patrick Tuipulotu at number 4. He is also vice-captain for this game, and Fabian Holland as the number 5. He got himself a try assist. He was also the leading tackler for the All Blacks with 15. The man is a workhorse, and if he can stay match fit, I think he's guaranteed himself that number 5 jersey throughout the whole of the Rugby Championship. In the loose forward trio, due to the head knock of Tupavai, it brings in Samapeni Finau as the number 6, Ardie Savia. He is once again the captain, and at number 7, he had some absolutely insane stats from last week. 5 defenders beaten, 2 clean breaks. He had a try assist thrown in there as well. He made about 50 metres with the ball in hand. So Savia, as much as some people wanted to see him rested for this match, I think it makes perfect sense why he's still out there, definitely with that captaincy to his name as well. Number 8, this is where we see Luke Jacobson coming to the side. I will say Leo Willie's probably one of the more unlucky guys to miss out on this lineup when it comes to this third test. He actually had the most turnovers won out of any All Black in that last match with 2. He hasn't done much wrong. Of course, that massive dummy sell off the back of the rolling maul that led to the Cam Roigard try definitely needed some decent acting skills from Leo Willie, but everyone thought he had the ball, and it did set up that try perfectly. But these will be Luke Jacobson's first minutes since Super Rugby Pacific, so he's been out a little while, but he normally can be versatile in terms of where he plays. He does work extremely hard for the Chiefs. Some people critique whether or not he can quite get up to that international standard, but he has had some pretty impressive games in the black jersey, so hopefully this one at FMG Stadium will also be one of them. Moving on to the back line, Cortez Ratama and Damian McKenzie, the Chiefs duo as the 19 combo. They have been making their way off the bench in Test Match 1 and 2. In the midfield, it is Quinn Tupaia and Anton Leonard-Brown. Tupaia making his way off the bench in match number 1, getting himself a turnover, so perhaps with a few more minutes, he may be able to have quite the impact here. Anton Leonard-Brown returning from a shoulder injury that left him out for a majority of Super Rugby Pacific, but now back at FMG Stadium, back alongside his Chiefs teammates. Just feels like the perfect time for Anton Leonard-Brown to have a very strong showing. Back 3, Rieko Ioane out on the left wing once more. Right wing Severis after just that 1 minute in the first test, and then Ruben Love getting his first minutes of the July Internationals. He will be the starting fullback with the cover of Will Jordan off of the bench. Looking through at the bench, they have made drastic changes compared to the last contest. All new front row replacements with McAllister, Bauer, and also Fletcher. Noel Papali'i comes in as the number 19. Now, they don't have a huge amount of lock cover, although Samapeni Finau in the starting lineup can go into that jersey if needed. But it will be an intriguing one for New Zealand, because obviously Papali'i can't be picked as a 7 here because you've already got Duplessis Karefi in that number 20 jersey. So I'm wondering whether or not Papali'i, maybe they're looking at him as going on the blind side and then Finau to lock if needed later on in the game, or perhaps even look at Papali'i as a number 8. I know he hasn't done it very often, but I believe in provincial rugby we've seen that a couple times. But I do think this is the most number 7s New Zealand have had in their side in quite some time, because we've got to remember Luke Jacobson theoretically can also play 7 and actually did for some of the Super Rugby season. In the back replacements, Noah Hotham, Timothy Tavatavanawai, and also Will Jordan there as the number 23. So overall, a strong New Zealand lineup that looks very different from what we saw in Test Match 1 and 2 for the French. It does seem like the plan was play everyone that they could in the first 2 Test matches and then try and combine the best players from those 2 contests and put it together for this game, see whether or not they can cause the upset. In the front row, they have got 2 changes compared to the last match. We see Bougaric come in as the number 2 ahead of Barlow, who has been very strong for France throughout the first 2 Test matches. The line-out accuracy in that second test may be a little bit lower than they would have liked, but a tackling machine Barlow, so he will instead make his way off of the bench. They have got Slimani, the Leinster representative, coming back in as the number 3. That is rather than Kalum. In the locking duo at number 4, we do see Arado come back into the starting side, and then Brennan, who was playing there in the last test match, he actually moves to number 7 in this contest. So once again, a little bit of a reshuffle from Fabien Galtier. Halagahu, he keeps his spot at number 5 though, but we do see Alexander Fisher come back in at number 6. That man was tied for the most tackles in Test Match number 1. He had the most turnovers out of any player with 3, and then alongside him we see the return of Gilliard as the number 8. He also got 2 turnovers, 1, so New Zealand will have to be on their A game in those breakdowns, because we're going to see a physical French side that want to get those important steals and try and get a bit of momentum in favour of Les Bleus. And I mentioned about it going into Test Match number 2. France did take players who won 6 out of 7 of their turnovers in that first match out of the lineup for Test Match number 2, whereas New Zealand are now a little bit in that boat. They have taken 6 out of their 8 turnovers out of the starting side. That involved Leo Willie, that involved Tupovai. Of course, they couldn't actually help that one. Amoni Narua managed to get a turnover 1. So I am intrigued to see whether or not, because France have got those men now back in, whether they can start to bring that bit of impact when it comes to the head-to-head. In the back line, this is where we see Nolan Legaric once again start as the 9. Hastoy comes in at 10, so no Seghans for this game. Villiers is back out on the left wing, which I'm sure is a welcome sight for French supporters. He was one of the standouts across the back line in Test Match number 1, getting turnovers 1 right on his own goal line. Also having those meters made can be an extremely handy player. Galfiku back into the midfield alongside Nicolas Deportier as the number 13. A lot more experience added to that French centre pairing. Theo Atasogbe once again finds himself on the right wing for this game, and then Leo Barry as the number 15. So that is the French starting lineup. Like I mentioned, a little bit of a mix of what we've seen in both of the games. And I would say that the biggest adjustment will probably be Hastoy as that number 10, seeing as Seghans has done so well as that French fly half option off the bench. Like I mentioned, they have got Barlow there as the number 16. We see Paul Malez alongside Demba Bamba as the number 18. Romain Taufifenua, he keeps his spot as the number 19. No Cameron Waukee in the 20 jersey for this game, as he did end up with a bit of an injury in that last match. He ended up hurting his knee on Tupovai's head, so he will be out for this contest. And then they have got Boucheton on that bench too. He made 17 tackles in the last test, so he's got a gas tank, and to have him coming onto the field later on, maybe when New Zealand are still reshuffling that little bit, could be quite dangerous for this French side. But jumping into some of the stats that we saw from the last contest. Now, New Zealand was still pretty successful when it came to their lineouts throughout that last contest. With Cody Taylor out for this match, though, it means there will be a bit of an adjustment period. But something that I noticed was they were being a lot more aggressive when it came to those line-out steals, and I don't know whether or not that was something that they picked up from Test Match number 1, or perhaps it was just the fact that Tui Pelotu was in the side as well. But I do think one of the keys for New Zealand will be to get as much possession as they can early, because at FMG Stadium, they will fully have the crowd behind them. The Chiefs fans in the crowd will want to see this predominant Chiefs backline in action. So if they can get one or two line-out steals, that can bring that counter-attacking chance to really get things going. But New Zealand's tackling throughout this series has been quite impressive too. 91% of tackles made in that last match up against France, whereas France still sitting relatively high, 86%. But it's those defenders beaten and those line breaks that will be absolutely key for success here. 7-3 in the line break statistic from match number 2. But another interesting stat was that France actually made less tackles than New Zealand in test match number 2. Now, if you do remember rightly, first game, France had to make 100 extra tackles against New Zealand. But the thing is, that stat doesn't replicate on the scoreboard because New Zealand won 43 points to 17, whereas that first match was close. So perhaps France just given them too many opportunities to break through the line. Like I said, Ardi Savia beating defenders for fun. France missing 23 tackles across that matchup, but they did win the territory battle in that last match. So perhaps we'll see once more a bit more of a kicking game used by France and at this match as well. But those were a few random facts rattled off in a really random order, I feel. But with those all being said, we now move on to the prediction. Now, I do think it's going to be closer than the second test match. New Zealand have a lot of new players in that starting lineup, and with all these new moving parts, it might take a little bit of time for them to be able to gel. France, they are in the same boat, but they have got that foundation from test match number 1, which did make them so strong. Gilliard and Fisher in that loose forward trio, I think, will add a lot into this matchup, having Fiku and Villiers back. But I do still think New Zealand, even with those adjustments, should be able to win this game. Now, we haven't seen a lot of these guys playing together at international level, but I am going to go with a prediction of, I think it's still going to be high scoring at FMG. I'll go 40 points to 25 in favour of New Zealand. It may take a little bit longer for both sides to find their rhythm, but I think once they do, we will see a lot of points. Perhaps a few more points in this game for France than some people are anticipating, but I'll go 40-25, see whether or not we are close for this contest. But of course, do let me know your score predictions for this game, ladies and gents. It is kicking off at 7:05 p.m. on Saturday night at FMG Stadium, and it will be the last match for the All Blacks before the Rugby Championship. For France, they have to wait till November before their next game, so they will certainly want to go out with a bang here and perhaps cause a big upset to end out their July. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.